Away in a manger, no crib for his bed. Lord Jesus, you lay down your sweet head. Today I've forsaken you, but you say it's okay, child, come to me. But you say it's okay, child, come to me. On the side of the sidewalk, he sits with his hand open to me. But I walked by, never thought twice that maybe he could be Jesus. Look at me in the eye. 'Cause what I do to the least of them, I do to you. Let me see you in the eyes of a stranger, in the hands of a lover. Please let me be true. When my fears are breaking down my spirit, when I forget that you're in it with me, oh Lord, let me seek you in the fear and in the pain, in the thorns that live again, in the dark and in the light, when I am losing sight, when I'm breaking down and torn, when I'm angry and I'm worn, help me not hide away from your gaze. When you say it's okay, child, it's okay, child, come to me.
Good morning, General Assembly. It is my great honor to introduce today's two guests. Please join me in first welcoming Semia and her sister Rula O'Day, who are both Canadian of Palestinian Christian heritage. Their father being a 1948 Nakba survivor from Jerusalem. Semia is an award-winning classical pianist and singer-songwriter. She graduated from McGill University, won the McGill Concerto Competition, and released 5 albums. She directs music at the Wall Street United Church and serves as the president of the Brockville Concert Association, promoting free concert access for local students and hosting significant events. Semia is also the founder and director of the Canadian Music Academy and the Montreal Academy of Music, connecting music teachers and students globally, with a strong focus on diversity, with teachers that speak over 40 languages. And now, her sister Rula, just bear with me, I gotta scroll down. Rula O'Day is here from the board and chair. She serves as the board chair for the Canadian Friends of Sabeel, CFOS for short, the national ecumenical response to a call of Palestinian Christians for solidarity. Through education and engagement, CFOS supports the struggle for equality, injustice, freedom, and human rights of Palestinians living under apartheid and military occupation. With partners around the world, CFOS works nonviolently for the just and durable peace for Palestinians and Israelis. Rula has served in a leadership role in several charitable organizations in Canada and has been interviewed and published in Canadian media on human rights issues. She is the president of a consulting firm that helps organizations develop strategies and processes to enhance their quality, speed, and efficiency of services. Rula is a trilingual, if I can speak this morning, Montrealer. May you please welcome Rula for this morning's presentation and thank Semia for her beautiful piano introduction.
Thank you, Laura Lee, for that very kind introduction. Yes, sure. Is that better? Okay, great. So I'm very honored to be here with you at the Presbyterian Church in Canada's General Assembly. I've been asked today to share with you on two topics. The first is about the situation for Palestinian Christians in Gaza, in the West Bank, in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, in Israel, and also here in the diaspora and in Canada, which includes Canada. And the second topic is about what actions Presbyterians can take to support those in need. First of all, I want to congratulate you. You've already taken some very significant and bold steps, both in terms of your long history of human rights, supporting human rights for Palestinians. And I understand that yesterday you made a big show of support for famine relief and humanitarian relief for those in Gaza, as well as Defense for Children International and for the Olive Tree Project. So you're already, I commend you for doing so much already. And I hope that my remarks will encourage you and support you as you continue to do the good work that you're doing. So as was introduced, my name is Rula, and I'm a Canadian of Palestinian heritage and Christian faith. Being here with you today gives me much hope and energy in these very dark times. Why? Well, because I can share my story with you and my family's story. For too long, our family has been very reluctant to share our story and identity for fear of repercussions, for fear of lost opportunities, and to minimize being dehumanized. And the dehumanization is real. We're not the only ones, obviously, throughout history who've had that happen to them. We've seen it, throughout history. We've seen it in many contexts, in many countries. We've seen it, we've seen anti-Palestinian and anti-Arab racism. That's real. We've seen anti-Semitism. That's real, as anti-Jewish racism. We've seen Islamophobia, anti-Muslim racism. That's real. We've seen it, even in the history of Canada against the Indigenous people. It's been around for a long time. We've seen it, we've felt it, and it's often coming from powerful leaders and powerful institutions. But we as Canadians of Palestinian heritage and Christian faith have realized that we have to be ourselves, that we have a very beautiful, peace-loving culture that we should share and celebrate, that we, in particular as Christians, need to speak up and act because it's part of our normal humanity. It is our normal humanity as Christians, and in fact, as people of all faiths and all backgrounds, that we need to express our humanity in the face of inhumanity. And we refuse to be dehumanized. So I was telling my sister yesterday, like, I don't feel like I need to justify that I'm a human. I am a human. Like, I don't need to justify that. But she reminded me that, well, of course, but you just need to, be yourself and share your story. So I'll start by just telling a little bit about me personally, and then I'll go into some of the work that we're doing as part of Canadian Friends of Sabeel and how we're responding to the call of Palestinian Christians for solidarity. So for myself, I came to Canada as a university student. I went to McGill, and I completed 3 degrees there. I did a Bachelor of Science, a Master's of Science, and then I did an MBA. And so after that, I got married, actually in a Presbyterian church in Montreal. That's because my mother-in-law was attending a Presbyterian church at the time, and she was a very, very organized lady. And I understand now the Presbyterian church has a very organized, well-structured approach to things, and I see where she got that from. And I did appreciate that about her, but also I appreciate that about the Presbyterian church as well. I worked in the pharmaceutical industry, and then I branched out and became a consultant working for organizations to help them update their strategies, update their operations to function in a faster, better, more efficient way, if you want to call it. So again, I think I have some Presbyterian genes somewhere that help me to do that, I think. But ever since a very young age, I've always been interested in supporting human rights. And in fact, on campus, I used to support Palestinian human rights. And of course, at that time, it was a very small group. Now, when you look at the campuses across Canada and North America, really amazing work being done. And it's not just, Palestinian Canadians. It's a very diverse group of Canadians on campus who are doing this, including Jewish Canadian students who are there very actively supporting human rights for Palestinians. So we do have our Jewish siblings from Independent Jewish Voices, from Jewish Voices for Peace, from Dr. Gabor Mate, and many Israelis, whether they're journalists or politicians or authors, are really doing amazing work speaking up on this. And also, of course, now that people are recognizing that there is a link between the human rights of Palestinians. It's all connected with a lot of other human rights issues, such as climate justice, anti-war. The military-industrial complex is obviously doing very well at this point in time with all the wars going on. So there is a connection there that we need to recognize as well. So I feel encouraged that a lot of the seeds that have been planted literally decades ago are coming to fruition. It is obviously tragic that it took a genocide to really make all of this coalesce as quickly as it is right now, but it is encouraging to see this support that we're seeing right now. So that's amazing. I'll talk a little bit about the work we do at Canadian Friends of Sabeel. So Canadian Friends of Sabeel is basically a support group. We have Friends of Sabeel across the world, but it's a national ecumenical group that responds to the call of Palestinian Christians for solidarity. And what we're doing basically is we're not coming up with our own ideas or our own actions. We're asking the Palestinian Christians on the ground, we're listening to them, we're asking them, we're amplifying their voices, and we're bringing it here to share in the Canadian Christian community. So we bear witness to the ongoing injustice that they're experiencing under Israeli occupation and apartheid, and we practice what we call costly solidarity with them. And it is a costly solidarity. Until very recently, if anybody spoke up about Palestinian human rights, that there was a real risk that they would be either silenced or smeared, but increasingly that's not working anymore. And So we're, even for myself, as an example, I'm a consultant. I've chosen to stop taking on contracts so that I can come and speak in these kinds of fora to share the witness and the voice of the Palestinian Christians. So it is a costly solidarity for many of us. So what do? We do, as was shared earlier, we do a lot of educational activities. We provide resources to the Canadian Christian community so that we can support equality, justice, freedom, human rights for the Palestinians who are living under apartheid and military occupation. And then we work with partners. So our partners include Kairos Canada, which the Presbyterian Church is part of. We've worked with a variety of churches directly. We've worked with we're increasingly working with the Canadian Council of Churches as well. And we do this by promoting non-violently a just and durable peace for Palestinians and Israelis. Now, our board members are actually reflecting a wide range of denominations, and a couple of them some of you probably know. Dr. Marjorie Ross is on our board. She's a Presbyterian, and the Reverend Dr. Dorcas Gordon, who I'm sure many of you know, is also on the board. But we also have folks from the Anglican, Catholic, United, Christian Reformed Church, Mennonites, and Orthodox members, and they're spread out across Canada. And that's obviously, it's by design so that we can have a good reach across all of the Canadian Christian community. Now, I've been asked to share with you about the situation for Palestinian Christians, and I'm going to use my family story as the scaffolding around which I do that. I'm delighted that I was able to have my sister Samuel join us today, and she's a very gifted musician, as you've already seen, and she's going to help tell our story with some musical pieces scattered throughout the story. And that's a good thing because you don't have to listen to me talking nonstop, which is a good thing. And also a warning. You know how sometimes they give you warnings in programs like this program may have some graphic images or distressing images. My warning is that this talk may have some surprises for you and some twists and turns. And whenever we share our story, people often say, "Oh, I never knew that," or "How come we don't hear that in the news?" or "That is so unjust. I wasn't aware." So if that happens to you, don't worry. We'll explain this and we'll explain why that might be the case and what you can do about it. But I also know that a lot of you are very well informed, have actually been recently, and have consistently been going on pilgrimage trips to the Holy Land and are already very well aware and have come back and talked about what you saw, what you heard. In fact, some of our board members, that's how they became involved in this issue, is they went, they saw, they came back, and they were, they felt that it was important to talk about what's happening. So a little bit about my family story. My father, Sammy, is Anglican, and my mother, Ida, is Greek Orthodox. So my dad is 90 and my mom is 80. And if we look at where our relatives and friends are located, the Palestinian Christian relatives and friends, they're actually everywhere that you'll find Palestinians. So they're located in Gaza, in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem, in Israel, and also in the diaspora, and of course here in Canada. Now, Christians in the Holy Land have been there since the time of Jesus Christ, so that's 2,024 years. Now, we consider ourselves the original Christians. And if I was to quote my daughter Grace, she would say, "Oh yeah, we're OGs." But then when I looked up what OG means, I didn't like that translation of original gangsta. No, we're not going to call ourselves OGs. We're going to call ourselves OCs, or original Christians. So now, I have to tell you, we're always shocked when some Western Christians are themselves shocked by the fact that Palestinian Christians exist, and that actually they realize that they're original Christians from the cradle of Christianity. So we're always a little bit surprised by that. But it makes sense that, that's where the Christians started. And traditionally, the Palestinian Christians have been about 10% of the population. But now they're only about 2% and declining, unfortunately. And that's due to the impact of the what they're living under, the occupation, the apartheid, the ethnic cleansing. There's a lot of pressure. And many Christians who have been very steadfast in staying for decades are increasingly feeling forced to leave because of the situation. Now, while the majority of the Palestinians are Muslim, there is actually a small Palestinian Jewish community. It's a very small minority, but again, that makes sense because that's where Judaism started, and then along came Christianity, along came Islam. But all three of these faiths, we are told constantly by our parents and grandparents that Palestinians of all three faiths have lived in an integrated and friendly way prior to the 1900s, that they had the same culture, they had the same language, they had the same food. We all love a good hummus with some really good, virgin olive oil, and even our Easter cookies. For some of you who you may have tasted the Easter cookies that we have, they're actually like at Easter time we have an Easter cookie that has date inside it, and then it's sort of pinched with a pattern to reflect the crown of thorns that Jesus had, on the cross. And then we have another one which is sort of like a triangular shape, and that's representing the sponge with the vinegar that he was given. And then we have another one which is to represent the stone that was removed from the burial place, right, from the cave. So those are the kind of, and I recently discovered actually that these Easter cookies, which we use, as part of our celebrations, are actually even made by Palestinian Muslims. So they're very happy to share, the best of food across faiths. And so they were friendly neighbors, and they would be invited to each other's faith and family celebrations. And I imagine that the kids at these celebrations used to just get along and play together, no problem, in a very carefree way. And so what does that tell us? It tells us that the future of living together in justice and peace is not only possible, but that it had already been achieved in the past. And just think about that for a moment. There was very little religious extremism, and people were friendly and neighborly, and not just tolerant of each other. Now, in terms of denominations, there's two main denominations. There's the Orthodox and the Catholics. They each are about 40%, but there's also Protestants, such as Anglican, Lutheran, and Presbyterian. Now, in Gaza, there's only 3 churches and a rapidly dwindling number of Christians. There's about 1,100 of them. And unfortunately, sadly, the two of the main churches have sadly been in the news recently. So you probably heard that at the Catholic Church of the Holy Family, 2 women, a mother and a daughter called Nahida and Samar Anton, were shot dead by an Israeli sniper in December inside the church compound where they were sheltering, and another 7 were shot and wounded. The second church, the Greek Orthodox Church of St. Porphyrius, which is one of the oldest in the world, was attacked in October and 18 people died. I follow this church on Facebook, and you can too, and I'm always amazed by the steadfastness or sumud of these Christians as they continue to practice their faith, despite the tragedy and the fear. And when I watched them celebrate Palm Sunday recently, their small courtyard, which was severely damaged, they were still using that to do their Palm Sunday processions, and they continue to worship every Sunday. So really amazing what they're doing there. In terms of the Greek Orthodox Church, I mentioned that my mother is Greek Orthodox, and she lived in the old city of Jerusalem. Now, her family has 25 generations of Palestinian Christian priests, and they've all been documented in a book that was published by my grandfather, who was himself a Christian priest in Jerusalem. And when you go back 25 generations, you realize that the first priest was in the year 1113, which is quite amazing because that's pretty much halfway back to the start of Christianity. And so the Palestinian Christians have been a continuous presence in the Holy Land for over 2,000 years, and we cannot give up on our siblings from the cradle of Christianity. They need us to amplify their voice in our churches and in our ecumenical initiatives. They need our support, as do the Palestinians as a whole, so that they can stay steadfast in the Holy Land, representing and worshiping our Lord of Peace. And now we'll have a piece of music called, it's a simple Palestinian hymn called Lord of Peace, Ya Rab as-Salam. And salam means peace, shalom, salam, peace. And so, over to you.
All right, everybody, welcome up, Sam. And I'm going to read these words out, and maybe you could repeat them if you like to. So the words are Ya Rab as-Salami, which is God of peace. Try that. Ya Rab as-Salami. And then, yeah, it's hard. And then I'll try to keep it simple. Amtir alayna salam, which is rain down your peace on the world. Amtir alayna salam. And then Ya Rab as-Salam, make a path for your goodness. Imla qulubana salam, fill our hearts with your peace. In English, God of peace, come among us, rain down your peace on the world. Make a path for your goodness, fill every heart with your peace. If you remember any of those words, feel free to hum along. Now in English, God of peace. God of peace, come among us. Rain down your peace. Rain down your peace on the world. Make a path for your goodness. Make a path for your goodness. Fill every heart with your peace. Fill every heart with your peace.
Thank you, Samia. Now, my father, Sami, as I mentioned, is a 90-year-old survivor of the 1948 Nakba, or which translates actually into catastrophe. And I recently learned that the word Shoah also means catastrophe. So in 1948, Zionist terrorist paramilitaries and later the Israeli military forced his family to flee their home in Jerusalem. And in fact, a couple of weeks later, their home was bombed and they could not go back. They thought they were just leaving for a couple of weeks and they would be back, but that never happened. He was 14 years old at the time, living in this comfortable home with his father, who was a lawyer, and his mother, who was a school teacher, and he had 4 siblings. Overnight, they became poor refugees. They were not allowed to return to their homes, and they had to rebuild their lives as best they could. And through sheer determination, hard work, and family support, all 5 of the siblings pursued their education and succeeded in their professions. Education is highly prized by Palestinians. My 3 sisters and I are all university educated, thanks to the sacrifices my parents made. And one of the reasons why education is so highly prized is because nobody can take that away from you once you have it. They can take away your home, they can take away your livelihood, they can't take away your education. And unfortunately, though, in Gaza, it has been taken away because virtually all of the universities and schools have been destroyed or damaged, with a huge impact on children and the youth. Now, my father has became a broadcaster at the BBC World Service in London at one point, and I had an uncle who was a doctor, an aunt who was a nurse, and another one of my aunts became the co-founder of the Palestine Children Relief Fund, which is a very well-known charity in the US. And what they did was they built the only pediatric cancer clinic in Gaza, because at the time it was very hard to seek treatment outside because of the blockade around Gaza imposed by Israel. It was not it was not allowed to go outside of the Gaza Strip to seek medical treatment. And so they built this clinic, and it was named after my aunt and her husband. But tragically, this clinic was also recently damaged and destroyed by the Israeli army. Now, half the Palestinian population, and by definition, half of the Palestinian Christians, suffered from this 1948 Nakba, which we call a catastrophe, and they had the trauma of losing their homes, their land, their livelihoods, and their communities. There was also several massacres and atrocities that occurred in 1948 that were really designed to scare people into fleeing. Did you know that 70% of Gazans are some of those people who fled from various places around Gaza? And so 70% of them are Nakba survivors and their descendants, basically. And sometimes I wonder if my family had fled in a different direction, if they had gone to Gaza, my family would actually be suffering exactly the same way as the Gazans are suffering right now. So as Palestinians, many of us have intergenerational trauma, and that trauma is ongoing and continuous. My mother often told my dad to try to stop thinking about all the injustices that the Palestinians had and just get on with his life. And his response was, I can't do that. I can't forget it. It's in my soul. I live it every day, and I will live it every day until the end of my life. And sadly, he is witnessing another catastrophe. It's being live streamed every day. We'll turn now to Samia to sing a song called My Mother's Scarf. It's by a famous Palestinian poet called Mahmoud Darwish, and it's about the sorrow of losing your home and your homeland.
The song's called Soft Rain, like Rula mentioned. And it was translated by John Osfour, and I set it to music here. And it was written a few decades ago, and yet still, I believe, still has a lot of meaning for all of us. Here's Soft Rain. Soft rain in a distant autumn, and the birds are blue, and the earth is a festival. Don't say that I'm a cloud over the airport. I want nothing from my country, which has fallen from the window of a plane, except my mother's seasons for a new day. Soft rain in a sad autumn, and the twists are green, and the sun is clay. My face is at dusk, my death is a fetus. I want nothing from the country which has forgotten the accent of the dispossessed, except my mother's scarf and reasons for a new day. Soft rain in a distant autumn, and the birds are blue, and the earth is a festival. The birds have flown into a country's a desire, in flames the kiss I've sailed in the main. I want nothing from the home of knives and birds, except my mother's scarf and reasons for. I want nothing from the country which has slain me, except my mother's scarf and reasons for a new day.
Thank you, Samuel. We Palestinian Christians, as with all Palestinians, are stunned that yet another Nakba is being waged against us. We are grieving at the silence, the inaction, the impunity, and the complicity that has been going on for 76 years since the 1948 Nakba. Since the brutal illegal military occupation by Israel in 1967 that basically took over Gaza and the West Bank and started to colonize and put settlements in there, as you know. And also the cruel blockade that started in Gaza in 2007. We mourn because this silent inaction has led to the horrific and unparalleled crisis that we have been witnessing for the past 8 months. And the reason why we mourn is all of that could have been avoidable if intervention had happened before. If interventions had happened before, we would not have seen October 7th, and we would not have seen what happened after October 7th. So yes, we mourn. We mourn because of all the suffering that's happened up to that point. We mourn the killing of innocent Israeli civilians, the injury of, and that's 1,139, the injury of 8,700 Israelis, and the dozens of Israelis held captive. We mourn over 36,000 innocent civilians, Palestinians in Gaza, including more than 16,000 children who've been killed by Israeli bombing. With nearly 83,000 injured and maimed, only a trickle of humanitarian aid has been allowed through by Israel. Now famine is spreading across the entire population. That's 2.3 million people, along with the diseases that will kill the most vulnerable, given the destroyed healthcare system. We have 20,000 orphans without any living relatives. And children's development is definitely going to be stunted on the long term. And who knows what the psychological trauma will be. So we at Canadian Friends of Sabeel are amplifying the voices of our Palestinian Christian siblings to confirm the extreme urgency, like really immediately what needs to be done is to end the genocide and the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. And I know there's some sensitivities about using the word genocide, but this is what we feel is happening to us. And it's what the International Court of Justice has called a plausible genocide, and it's being investigated. And they've called for protection of Palestinians from genocide. We're amplifying also that the truth comes out to ensure that international journalists and UN officials and aid workers can go in and document and report what is happening. So these are some of the things that are being called for the immediate term. I think you've already heard about the Ottawa ceasefire pilgrimage where the Reverend Ian Ross MacDonald and the Reverend Dr. Gordis Gordon, who are from the Presbyterian Church, participated, along with church leaders from several denominations. And they gave excellent speeches. They informed us about the recent trip that they did to meet with Palestinian Christians in the Holy Land. And you've probably heard what the 5 calls to action were, which was an enduring and sustained ceasefire, immediate flow of life-saving food, water, aid, fuel, and humanitarian assistance, the release of all the captives, Israeli captives and Palestinian captives, because there are thousands that are being held, Palestinian captives being held without due process, without charge. Ending all arms transfers to Israel and ending the occupation so that a just peace can begin. And both Reverend Ian MacDonald and Reverend Dorcas Gordon provided very powerful reports on what they heard from Palestinian Christians. So I'm taking the liberty of sharing with you what they heard from Palestinian Christians on their very recent trip. One of them was they were asked, the Palestinian Christians they met were saying, describe and name honestly and accurately what is happening in Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. So in Gaza, there is a genocide happening. In the West Bank, there is ethnic cleansing happening. Palestinians are being driven from their homes, their villages, their farms, their olive groves. We need to use the terms apartheid, and that has a specific meaning. It has a legal meaning, and it's been used by Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and by B'Tselem, which is an Israeli human rights organization. Settler colonialism, we need to recognize that what is happening is settler colonialism. And we need to recognize when Christian Zionism is being used to justify what's going on. And speaking of settler colonialism, we know from a Canadian experience what that means and the damage that's been done to the Indigenous peoples of Canada. And we are going through a period of healing and reconciliation, and undoubtedly in the future, healing and reconciliation will be needed. And perhaps Canada can share its experience on how to do that in the future. But also the Palestinians have been asking that we believe them when they say that the actions of the Israeli military and the unchecked armed settlers are threatening their right to worship. So both as Christians and as Muslims, they're under dire threat, particularly in the old city of Jerusalem. Clergy are regularly spat on, churches are vandalized, cemeteries are desecrated, and access to places of worship are controlled by the Israeli police. It's been bad in the West Bank, the occupied West Bank, for a long time, as the Reverend Ian Ross MacDonald mentioned, but it's getting worse. Increasingly, children are being illegally detained, and you've heard about the great work that Defense for Children International has been doing for some time, but it's actually getting worse. People are being shot not just by soldiers, but also by armed settlers, and Palestinians have been openly referred to as animals. And one of the questions that the Reverend Ian Ross MacDonald reflected to us, what he heard, are the following questions. So where is the church? Where is the church's courage and integrity? Why is there little more than silence from so many of the church pulpits and public platforms? Why is the church not mobilized to act by the evidence of ethnic cleansing? Why is the church not doing more to challenge the misuse of scripture and theology to justify the perennial sins of racism, colonialism, and murder? The church's leadership is very important. It's viewed as being a moral force in our society. And so the churches are important for that moral leadership on truth and justice and for the advocacy that they're doing. So as an example, the recent ceasefire pilgrimage in Ottawa was a very good example of that moral, the church leadership and the moral advocacy that they bring to our elected representatives. And let's not minimize the impact of that. This is huge because collectively those churches that were there on Parliament Hill talking to MPs of all stripes, they are going there representing 4 million Canadians, and that is powerful. Politicians are listening, and they are being encouraged to speak up and take action. And with an election coming up, they're likely to listen more and perhaps act more because that's the way politicians work. But it's a real opportunity for us as Christians as churches, as Christians, as churches, as church leaders to bring our positions and our Christian values to to the table. Now, what about after the immediate term? So these are some of the things that have been called for the immediate term. I mentioned the 5 calls to action about ending the genocide and the humanitarian crisis. So those are all very good to achieve as quickly as possible, obviously. But also the Palestinian Christians are calling on the churches to insist on accountability by asking the Canadian government to uphold international humanitarian and human rights law. So these are things that should apply to everyone, to all people, doesn't matter who you are. Everybody has protection under these laws. And if these laws are not upheld and applied, the world risks descending into barbarism and endless violence against ordinary, innocent civilians. So the good news is that there are 2 international courts currently working on this. The first one is called the International Court of Justice, and this one works at the state level. It's the highest, it's called the World's Court. It's a UN body, and it acts at the level of states. And it has found that there is a plausible case of genocide by Israel and has issued several provisional measures to protect Palestinians in Gaza. And yet, tragically, the massive death toll, the injuries, the enforced starvation, the destruction of critical civilian facilities, and the prevention of conditions for life continue as we speak. The Biden-supported ceasefire deal that we just heard about literally a couple of days ago has yet to be formally accepted and implemented. Now, the second court is the International Criminal Court, and that spoke on Monday, May 20th, when So the International Criminal Court is one that targets individuals as opposed to states. It deals with the responsibilities of individuals. And the prosecutor announced that he would request arrest warrants for Israeli and Hamas leaders for alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity. And interestingly, the commentary from B'Tselem, which is an Israeli human rights organization, this is how they responded to that, to what happened at the International Criminal Court, and also at the International Court of Justice. So I'm quoting what they said in response. The international community is signaling to Israel that it can no longer maintain its policy of violence, killing, and destruction without accountability. Likewise, the request for arrest warrants against Hamas leaders for the crimes of October 7th is important and draws a red line where harm to civilians is concerned. B'Tselem continues, the Israeli violence directed at Palestinians to perpetuate the occupation is state violence and is inherent to the Israeli apartheid regime. This is true in the West Bank, in the Gaza Strip, and everywhere else. The International Criminal Court intervention and the ICJ, or International Court of Justice rulings, are a chance for us Israelis to realize what we should have understood long ago, that upholding a regime of supremacy, violence, and oppression necessarily involves crimes and severe violations of human rights. So that summarizes a little bit what the Palestinian Christians have been going through, what they've been saying. Here in Canada, we do have Canadians of Palestinian origin and Christian faith, and you will find them attending a variety of churches, Greek Orthodox, you'll find them at Catholic churches, Anglican, Presbyterian, and so on. And so I know that for myself, I've been attending several churches recently, and I'm actually looking for a new church home myself, because for me personally, as a Canadian of Palestinian Christian heritage and faith, I need to be part of a church that recognizes this reality and that advocates for justice across the board, not just for Palestinians, but for all, and supports human rights for all. So the fact that the Presbyterian Church is doing this is amazing, and I think it's something that will attract many people who, it will retain and attract many people who feel the same way. And it's not just Palestinian Christian, Canadians of Palestinian Christian origin. It's at this point, it's a wide range of people. So I think this is a trend I think that we're going to see continuing for sure. So switching gears, the next thing I was asked to speak about was some actions that the Presbyterian Church may wish to consider taking. And actually, you're already doing a lot of this, so really kudos to you for all the great work that you've been doing over several years. I've seen, many of the resolutions and the actions and so on. But I would just encourage you to continue and strengthen and speed up some of what you're doing, especially given the dire situation that is happening right now. So the first one is to listen to your Palestinian Christian siblings, and to connect with them and to go and see them. And the sermon this morning talked about connection. That's really important. It's really important for us here in Canada, but it's also really important for the Palestinian Christians there. And I know that many of you have been on trips there. You've already connected. Laura Lee was telling me about that earlier. Dorcas has taken several trips, taken folks on several trips. So these are really eye-opening and life-changing, and often people come back really anxious to share what they saw and heard, and it's really important. And actually, we at Canadian Friends of Sabeel do help churches to organize these pilgrimages in a way that respects the Palestinian Christian presence, that respects the Palestinian presence, and takes into account what's going on in real life over there. The second thing would be to address the root causes. So well done on providing amazing humanitarian aid. That's fantastic. But also address the root causes, because if we address the root causes, eventually there wouldn't be a need to give this humanitarian aid. We would resolve the root causes. I encourage you to continue, strengthen, and speed up your ecumenical advocacy initiatives and all the resolutions and letters you've been doing. There have been some great activities through Kairos Canada, through the Canadian Council of Churches. You've written great letters to MPs. You've met with MPs, which is amazing. So I encourage you to continue doing that, but then also hold accountable organizations and institutions as well. So consider boycott, divestment, and sanctions. Consider especially the companies and organizations that are involved in the arms trade, and those that are basically promoting the settler colonial activities in the West Bank. I personally have complained to my bank, which is Scotiabank, about Elbit Systems, which delivers drones that are being used in the Gaza Strip. And recently, they've actually, a lot of people have been protesting about this, and recently they started to gradually reduce their stake in Elbit. So things are happening, and so even at the institutional level, that's important. Continue to develop resources to inform the Presbyterians in Canada in the various congregations. So perhaps recommend alternative media, books, reliable sources. As I mentioned, if you just rely on the mainstream, you won't get the full picture. Whether that's the CBC, the New York Times, there's been reports recently about the efforts to suppress what's happening to the Palestinians. Rely on Canadian Friends of Sabeel. We have a lot of resources that we're very happy to share with you. And if you go to our website, friendsofsabeel.ca, you'll find a lot of them. And a lot of them are actually developed by Sabeel in Jerusalem. So every week there's a wave of prayer. And basically what it is, it gives us short updates on what's happening on the ground. And then there's prayers that happen that you can use. You can use these individually. You can use these in your churches. These are already done for you. And I know you're all super busy or you don't have a lot of time and resources, but these already exist, and just please feel free to use them. There's also something called Kumi Now, which is an educational set of webinars that happen every week, and they'll invite organizations like Defense for Children International and talk about a topic like children's rights. The next time it will be a different aspect. Again, those are available to you and can be used as you see fit. They're very well done. I encourage you to continue doing these come and see, go and tell pilgrimages. They're very powerful. In fact, in November, Sabeel is organizing a conference called, it's on the topic of religious extremism, and we've committed to sending people from Canadian Friends of Sabeel and to promote it, because I think that will be a very important and timely topic. And also you could do a pilgrimage around that at the same time. Here in Canada, we also offer lectures. We have one coming up in the fall, which is going to be in the Toronto area. We offer liturgical resources. And the other thing that we do is we do bring together the churches to have these ecumenical discussions so that we can advance, learn from each other and advance. We can synergize, we can align, and then we can act with more strength and speed towards our shared values and our shared goals, which is justice and peace for all, the Palestinians and the Israelis alike. And for the longer term, well, as I kind of alluded to, we cannot wait any longer. It's already been 76 years of steadfastness or sumud that Palestinian Christians like my father have continued to insist that they have a right to life, safety, security, freedom, equality, justice, human rights, self-determination, just like all people around the world deserve. And that would be without exception. So just like the Israelis, just like all the people in the Middle East and beyond. And our prayer is that the Palestinians will no longer be an exception and that humanity will stop the dehumanization. We're so encouraged by the rising support from diverse groups here in Canada and around the world. This call is being echoed by our siblings at Independent Jewish Voices for Peace, and others around the world, especially young people. And we're so proud of the young people on campuses. I have to say that unfortunately many of them are being smeared or attacked, but it is not anti-Semitic and it is not radical to call for what is being called for. It's about truth and justice, and it's about our values. In fact, it's the only way to ensure that the Israeli and Palestinian children will have a bright future, one that's full of life, safety, security, freedom, equality, justice, and self-determination, so that they can all have a carefree childhood full of hopes and dreams that they can actually achieve. And with that hope and prayer in mind, we'll end with my sister Samia singing a beautiful song called Kites that she wrote. She wrote it in honor of the children in Gaza, but she'll be singing it today in honor of all children, Palestinian and Israeli children, whether they're Jewish, Christian, or Muslim, who one day will fly their kites together. They used to play together in the past, and they will fly their kites together in the future, as they've done in past generations in the Holy Land. So I wanted to leave you with this hopeful note that on something that has happened in the past, it will happen in the future, and this song reflects that. So thank you for your time today. Appreciate it.
Just so you know, in 2011, yeah, thank you, Rilla. In 2011, the children of Gaza won the Guinness World Book of Records for flying the most kites in the world. They flew, I think, 12,000 some odd kites. So this song is for all the children of the world, really, that they may live in peace. This is the one that hopefully will let you guys afterwards go and have your lunch. I'm sure you're starving, so please go ahead. How can I help you fly your kite again? How can we help the world to see your plight and pain? Oh Lord, help us to see, and we call humanity. How can I help you to fly your kite again? How can we hear across all these fields the truth and light? How can we face this moment of grace and all this time? Oh Lord, help us to see, and we call humanity. the world to see again. Fly your kite again. Sing with me, fly your kite. Fly your kite again. Fly your kite. Hallelujah, fly your kite again. Fly, little angel. Fly, little angel, fly. Fly, little angel. Fly, little angel, fly. Fly, little angel, hallelujah, one day you will fly again.
So this is one of those moments. We are very thankful that you have joined us and that you have brought your story to us and have given us a chance to listen well and told us about your family in word and song and pictures. You've told us about the children, flight rates. That you've recognized the suffering of so many people in that part of the world that has gone on so long. And that you've given us words of hope and things to do, some of which we're kind of stumbling into with some good intentions and probably not enough resolve, but to go forward. And we have some gifts for you. Small but words of thanks. I would also point out that Rula will be participating in the panel on narratives of identity and hope tomorrow, and you can see how appropriate that invitation was. So at this point, we just want to thank you for what you have brought us and wish you God's peace to you and your people and to all people in the Middle East. Good Lord, it's been long enough. Let's have some peace there. So thank you very, very much.